Hello, everyone. I'm Gloria Greer. As a journalist for over 35 years, I have interviewed some of the most important and entertaining people of our time. So please join us as we sit back and enjoy classic conversations. Sidney Sheldon has been on the New York Times bestseller list for more than 20 years. He is listed in the Guinness Book of Records as the most translated author in the world. His newest book, his 17th, is called The Sky is Falling. And it is a great pleasure to have as our first conversational guest, Mr. Sidney Sheldon.
Thank you, Gloria. I'm delighted to be here.
Sidney, I was fascinated with your book, The Sky is Falling. And when I read it, the first thing that came to mind was that a long time ago I had interviewed you, and you mentioned the fact that you do extensive research. And This book is obviously full of it.
It takes place all over the world, and I've been to all the countries in the book. That includes Russia, England, Italy, France. I went to Aspen, Alaska, a lot of places.
Sidney, when you read the book, there is a family that is very prominent. I don't want to give away the plot, but they have there's a great deal of tragedy. And I could not help but think, although it is different, of the Kennedy family. And did that come to your mind?
Well, some people have thought of that, Gloria.
Yeah.
It's the story of Dana Evans, who is an anchor person in the television station in Washington, D.C. And she interviews a member of this charismatic family. And 3 hours later, he's dead. He's been murdered. And she realizes that this is the fifth member of the family to die in an accident in less than a year. And Dana starts to investigate. She thinks it's too much of a coincidence. And as she gets into it deeper and deeper, she finds that she has become the hunted instead of the hunter. And her life is in terrible danger, and she doesn't know who's trying to kill her.
You know, is there a spark? I mean, here you've written now 17 books in a period of around 20 years.
20 years.
Is there a spark that suddenly hits you and you say, wow, that would make a great plot? Or what causes that?
I never start with a plot. When I begin a book, I have no plot, no beginning, middle, or end. I start with a character. And as I dictate my books, and as I talk, other characters come in, and I begin to see where the story's going. They really lead me, and my characters write my books.
But you know, again, back to this intensive research that you do, one of the things that just fascinated me in The Sky is Falling was and the character, she does go to Russia, and when she was in Russia, there's mention of the Duma, and the lower part of the Duma, the lower house, so to speak, and the fact that no one there can ever lose their jobs. So you can have a gangster. It was incredible.
The members of Parliament, the lower house, in Russia, are immune from the law. They can't be touched as long as they're members. And they can be murderers, rapists, whatever. They're untouchable. Russia has a few very strange customs.
Right. Yeah, but I'd never really read that. The other thing, of course, that's intriguing, and again, I don't want to give away the plot, but there is something there in Russia that when I read it, I thought, wow, what a storyteller Sidney Sheldon is. How in the world could he make up this extraordinary event or place, and then when you get to the end, it exists?
Yeah, the answer is I didn't make it up. It's real and it exists. And it's frightening.
It is frightening.
Yes.
I would like to say, Sidney, that you are the only person who has ever won an Oscar, a Tony for the theater, and an Edgar for your very first book. Someone said to me, what is an Edgar? Well, that's a very prestigious award for writing. And your very first novel, you won the Edgar.
Right. Edgar's named for Edgar Allan Poe. And they give an award for the best mystery book of the year. And I was lucky enough to get it for The Naked Face, my first book.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was interested in the fact that you started as a teenager writing, not writing, but at the studios and reading scripts that I guess you would then recommend or not recommend to the studios. As a reader, really.
I was a reader at a studio because I couldn't get a job as a writer. No one would hire me.
And you made $25 a week?
$25 a week. So I got up at 5 every morning to work on my own original stories. And I finally sold one, and I was established as a writer of very B movies.
Then you went in the Air Force, and then you went to New York.
When the Air Force went to New York, and I got my wings in California. While I was waiting for secondary school, I wrote 3 Broadway plays, and they were all running on Broadway simultaneously.
That's just amazing. I mean, really, for someone who was considered a new writer to have 3 plays running at once.
I was very lucky.
And then, of course, much later, you won the Tony for The Redhead with Gwen Verdon.
Yes.
Since you have won the 3 awards, and you are the only one to do so, is there one that is more important to you? What was the most gratifying?
Gloria, it's not the awards at all. The awards are the icing on the cake, but it's the writing itself and touching people around the world. I'm in 160 countries or 180 countries. It's in the Guinness Book of Records. I'm the most translated author in the world. And I get letters from people that are so touching. That's what makes it important, more important than the awards.
When you were a child, did you decide then that you wanted to be a writer, an author?
I always knew it. I sold my first poem when I was 10 years old. My father was a salesman and kind of a street fighter, and it made him very nervous that I was writing instead of being outside with the boys playing baseball. It made him panicky that I was writing poetry. So I gave him a poem and asked him to send it into a children's magazine I read, Wee Wisdom. And I later found out he sent it in, but he didn't want to be embarrassed when they turned it down. So he took my name off and put my uncle's name on. 2 weeks later, he was having lunch with my uncle, who said, "Why would Wee Wisdom magazine send me a check for $5?
That's funny. That's wonderful. You know, your book, The Other Side of Midnight, was on the New York Times bestseller list for 52 weeks. That's a record.
At the time, it was a record. It's been exceeded since then.
Well, that's what happens. You wrote a movie called, the screenplay, of Annie, Get Your Gun. And it is now going to be reissued for a big 50th anniversary celebration. It starred Howard Keel and Betty Hutton, and we're going to be right back with a surprise guest.
Anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Anything you can be, I can be greater. Sooner or later, I'm greater than you.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
I'm so thrilled to get you two together as a surprise.
Yeah. Well, it's been a long time getting together here with Sidney, because he's been off fooling around with something. And what have you been doing, Sidney?
I've been writing a few books.
Have you?
I want to ask you, I'm really curious about something, and that is, of course, Annie, Get Your Gun was a great musical on Broadway with Ethel Merman. So when you adapted it for the screen, Sidney, did you have to change certain things? I'm sure you did.
Well, what happened was I had just gone to MGM.
Yeah.
And I went there to write a picture called Pride and Prejudice. In the middle of that, Arthur Freed, the producer of Annie, called me and said, "I want you to stop that and do Annie, Get Your Gun." So I began writing it. Now, the first act of Annie ends with Annie going to Europe. The second act opens with her returning. So the question for a screenwriter is, what happens in between? Yeah. Do you do a lot about Europe, a quick montage? And that's not a decision for a writer to make. It's a producer's decision because of the cost.
Yeah.
So I called Arthur Freed and made an appointment to see him. He canceled it just before the appointment. The next day he canceled that. My agent came in and said, "Arthur Freed is very disappointed with you." And I said, "Why? What have I done?" He said, "He's not getting any pages." And I suddenly realized he didn't want to talk about the script. He wanted me to write it, and then he's more interested in the music and the singing and the girls. So I quickly sat down and wrote it. Then he met with me, and we went on with it.
Okay, now what's the story with Irving Berlin? Irving Berlin wrote the music and Annie, Get Your Gun.
Music,
but he would have
and the lyrics.
And the lyrics. But is it true that he would have nothing to do with the motion picture?
Well, I can't really tell you anything about that, except that I met him once. We were doing it at that time with Judy.
Judy Garland.
Yeah.
That was another thing, that Judy Garland was in it, and then Betty
Arthur
Hutton.
Freed walked in with Irving Berlin, and he said, sing us a song. So we did Falling in Love Was Wonderful, And Mr. Berlin said, "That's nice," walked away, never said another word. And that made us feel real good. I mean, I thought, it didn't bother me too much because I was a non-entity at the time. But but Judy Garland, my gosh, to treat her like that, I didn't understand
it destroyed her
at all.
They fired her. Emotionally, she wasn't up to doing it.
Yeah.
They shot scenes with her.
She was tired.
Well,
Sidney. The worst thing, she was dead tired when they started.
And she recorded songs.
Yeah, we recorded all the songs, and she was wonderful. And then the second thing with Buzz Berkeley, my second shot, I had to come from horseback, from behind a scene at full gallop. And I'd done it 6 times. It was fine. And Harry Stradling, the cameraman, kept saying, "That's fine, we've got it." And he said, "No, one more. Next time I came around, and boom, down went the horse and broke my leg.
Oh, my.
And so they had to shoot around me. And that was the beginning of the end for poor Judy, because she was on uppers and downers, and I didn't know what the hell they were talking about.
Well, of course, the people who saw the movie, and a great many of them would associate Betty Hutton because she is the one who finally did do the part. So I don't know how many people would remember that Judy Garland
Judy. They don't know that Judy started.
And I wondered whether, again, in your writing at Sidney, because it was to star Judy Garland, whether there was any, she has a totally different personality than Betty Hutton. Did that affect your writing?
No, it didn't really affect it because the personality is in the character created by Herb and Dorothy Fields.
Yeah.
So that's what I stuck to, because they wrote a brilliant Broadway play.
Right. Well, and as far as you're concerned, Howard, working with Judy and then again Betty Hutton with totally different personalities.
Yeah.
Was that difficult for you?
No, because I had no experience. I was a non-entity, and I really didn't have that much experience.
Hadn't you done Oklahoma yet in New York?
Yeah, I did
and
Oklahoma and Carousel.
Yeah,
but that's
pretty
not
big
much.
shows.
Big shows, but when you're doing 9 shows a week, and I did that for 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's all I did. I didn't have the strength to go out and learn anything else. So when I came in to do my first picture, it was really a big thing.
Was this your first picture?
Yeah. Well, I had done a little picture before that with Valerie Hobson, but this was my first real big picture at MGM, and I had no problems at all, and I had no problem with Betty at all, and I think Betty did a very good job.
Oh, I think she was.
And I think anybody with that part would have been great in that part.
Yeah.
Because it was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful part to portray.
Well, again, back to Irving Berlin. He never came back.
Never came
made
back,
a comment.
Say, boo, go to hell or anything. And what I think a terrible thing to do to people like that, to just take and close it up and say, that's the end of it, no more. I don't think that.
I liked you, I didn't like you, or anything.
Well, I didn't care what the hell he felt about me personally, because I began to develop a hide like a rhinoceros about that time, And I don't understand that kind of thing, but some people are just like that. I mean, it wasn't only him. I think other people got involved in it too.
What about you, Sidney? Did you have any dealings at all with Irving Berlin?
Yes.
Okay.
More, I think, perhaps than Howard from what he's saying.
Yeah.
But he would come into my office and say, "I just wrote a song. Listen to this," and he would sing it, and he may not have been the worst singer in the world, but he was close to it. When he was through, he said, "What do you think?" I said, "I don't know. I can't tell anything." But I was in meetings with Irving and Arthur Freed, the producer, and we talked about songs and where they would go and so on. So I had a little more contact. And also I did Easter Parade with him, so I got to know him better.
Yeah. Well, that's another movie that you won an award for from the Screenwriters Guild.
Yes.
And that, too, was with Judy Garland. Again.
Right. Yeah, Judy and Fred Astaire.
Right. Well, now you have made so many movies and wonderful movies. Speaking of MGM and the fact that poor Judy was worked the way she was, did you feel that under Louis B. Mayer in the days of the star system, did you think that was bad, that they worked people too hard?
No, I didn't think that was bad. The only thing that they had a tendency to put you into a slot.
Yeah.
And my first picture was Annie Get Your Gun. And then the second picture was a thing called Pagan Love Song. And I didn't, at that time, I had no expertise. And I was thrown into a picture completely different. And they had a big fight over who was going to direct it and things like that. And it it turned out to be it wasn't really a good picture.
Yeah.
Had some couple of good songs in it, but boom, down. And from then on, I was not, I worked in things, but I don't think they know what the hell to do with me.
Well, they learned.
All of a sudden,
I mean, you certainly did a lot of great movies.
Well, not that many when you really look at it. Some of them I liked, some I don't.
Showboat?
Showboat was, I didn't want to do Showboat.
Really? Why?
No, and neither did Ava. Well, I didn't want to do it because I had seen a production, and it was a wonderful production, but I hated the way they treated Ravenel. They made him to such a weak and really, destroyed him.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want to do that part. And so I read a wonderful script by Johnny Lee Mayon.
Yeah.
And it was different, and I changed it.
Yeah.
And gave him some colognes, And I said, okay. And of course, working with Catherine was just the bitter
Grayson.
end.
Yeah.
And even she, in the scene, there was one scene that was so wonderful when he was down on his luck, and Catherine, when we had a big fight, and she said, I grabbed her, I said, Katie, get a hold of yourself, or rather, Noli, and she said, Gabe, take your hands off me, and I said, well, I'll have to do something about that, but she said, and before I hate you. And she didn't want to say that. So, but she did. And later on they came and they clipped it, Before I Hate You, out of the picture. And it made me so angry. But just little things like that.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful time to be in pictures. But when I look back at some of the things, I think that I did a fairly good job, I think.
Oh, and how? But we're talking about.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sidney.
In those days, actors were chattel.
Yeah.
And so were writers. I mean, they would just given assignments, told what to do, and that was it. They were in a contract. And if they resisted and turned down a part, they were put on suspension.
Television. We haven't talked about television.
Television?
You played
Clayton Farlow.
on Dallas.
On Dallas.
And for 10 years?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so many people think of you in
Well,
terms
they know
of
me
that.
more as Clayton Farlow than they do of anything else.
And I must say, Sidney, you created some of the best television shows on television.
Well, they were popular.
I Dream of
anyway.
Jeannie. You
Patty
created.
Duke, I Dream of Jeannie, Heart to Heart.
And Heart to Heart, which I always loved. Now, how did you like television next to films?
I didn't feel I was in television because it was shot like film.
Okay.
And actually, we shot in Dallas for 3-4 months. Then we go into MGM Studios, and I probably worked at MGM longer than any actor because I did like 8 years, 8 or 9, close to 8 years in 1940 and 50 there.
Yeah.
Then went back and did 10 more years after that. So it was like being at home.
That's wonderful.
And it was great. I had a great time doing it. It was a good part.
Yeah.
And
great.
it was a hoot. I mean, Leonard Katzman was a great producer. Wonderful, and a wonderful man.
What about
enjoyed it.
television for you, Sidney? Because you did write
It was
some-
different in those days. I created the Patty Duke show. I wrote most of the scripts for the first year or two. And no one was second guessing me. And about a month after it went on the air, Columbia asked me to create a show to be done there. So I created I Dream of Jeannie. And I produced that, and I was writing scripts for both shows at the same time. Now, and if I hired a writer, I would hire one person to write a script, and I would work alone on a script. Today, some of the shows have 15 writers working on one script, and then when they turn it in, the network tells them what's wrong with it. So it's changed a lot.
So you would not want to do that now?
No, it was fun in those days.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sit
Yeah.
down now. It was fun.
All right, now you do a lot of traveling, Howard. You're very much in demand, doing concerts in Europe.
I do a lot of concerts in England.
And you have a golf tournament, don't you, over there?
Yes.
For a very good cause?
It's for the NSPCC, which is the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. They always have a long name on things. And Princess Margaret is the head of it. And we've had 15 years of it, and we have raised close to £500,000 for abused kids in that one tournament.
That's
and
wonderful.
It's a great evening. Really is. It's astounding.
When you're doing shows in England, how many cities will you go to in a row?
We would go. I did as many as 40 cities in a row.
That's
The cities
incredible.
are very close together over there.
But that's
You know,
incredible.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the audiences are wonderful. Of course, you know, I opened Oklahoma there in 1947, and I stayed past the 6-month period and came home broke. But the people were so wonderful, my God. And once the English like you, boy, you have a friend for life. You know, I go back and I'm King Kong over there.
Yeah,
they're just great to me.
Sidney, you too have helped. You are very active helping children with literature?
I was a national spokesperson for the Coalition for Literacy. And the statistics, Gloria, are shocking. We have over 25 million illiterate adults in this country. We're behind Cuba. We're behind Russia.
My gosh.
And they just pass children from grade to grade, and they can't read or write. And these people are going to be running this country someday. So I think it's a major problem that we have to solve.
I think it's very sad, but I have a question. Our country has so many more people than Cuba, or these smaller countries. Are we behind? We have more people who are illiterate. How is the statistic? Yes.
Well, the fact that we have that number in our percentages, considering our population, is way out of line for us. And if a child learns to read in kindergarten, that's too late. He or she has to be taught to love literature and reading by their parents reading to them at home. That's where it has to start.
Yeah, but how do you do that when the parents aren't interested or they themselves don't read?
One of the problems is there aren't parents. There's a mother or a father. But one of the things that is happening that's wonderful is the libraries now, all over the country, have programs where someone who's illiterate can go to them and either get private lessons for nothing or join a class for nothing and learn to read and write. And that's very important.
Now, what about the internet and the computers? Because maybe they will also be. I love to read books, but there are those children who get hooked on the internet and want to read that way.
If books come out on the internet as they're beginning to do, to me that's another avenue to attract people. So I think it's good.
And that leads me to my next question. You do have your own website.
Yes, SidneySheldon.com.
Right.
And that's fun for me.
And tell me about the website.
Well, it has different sections about me. Some of it is theater, some of it is books, some of it is personal, movies. It's very interesting.
Well, can we read your books on the website, or must they just order?
maybe one day. But right, you could order, yes.
How do you feel about what's going on in the music industry with the downloading music and people being able?
I think that people who create music should get royalties for it, and it shouldn't be given away free. So I think something has to be done about Napster.
Yeah. And the same would hold true of books, I presume.
Of anything. I mean, if people have priority and they've created something, I think they're entitled to gain from their efforts.
Yeah, I do too.
Well,
I really do.
It stops people from trying to do things too. It's, you have to have encouragement. The right people have got to touch you in your lifetime. In my lifetime, it's incredible the people that have touched me in the right directions and things like that. Because I've had no schooling whatsoever. I was not a good student, but the right people touched me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what has to happen with people around the world. The right people got to come along and help you along with things, and we haven't done enough of that.
Very, very important.
Very important.
Now you're involved with a company down here in La Quinta.
Yeah.
It's going to do an outstanding show.
Yes, well, right now it's called La Quinta on Stage, and what it is, it's a musical version of the history of the Coachella Valley.
Yeah.
And Darlene Romano has written the music for it and has written the whole story.
I can hardly wait. I know it's going to be great. I want to thank you both so much for making our first conversation just wonderful.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed it.
It's been my
pleasure.
Thank
you, Gloria.
Just being with him again after all these years, it's so wonderful.
That's just great. Again, my thanks. And of course, I'll be back next week. A brand new show, more interesting conversations.